Hi, my name is Bridget Richardson. I'm the Assistant Director of Ecumenical and Pastoral Initiatives at the Nesty Center for Faith and Culture at University of St. Thomas in Houston. And I'm here with Tommy Rosson, Executive Director of Houston Responds. So Tommy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me on.
You know, I kept seeing your name pop up on all of the faith leaders calls with Interfaith Ministries. And when you spoke at the previous one, I was so excited to hear about what Houston Responds is doing with the pandemic and helping people providing masks. So can you tell us a little bit about how COVID-19 has been affecting maybe you and the Houston Responds team?
Yeah, I mean, it's thrown us a curveball. Our nonprofit started right after Harvey, where churches were already working together after that. We have so many disasters here, we kind of get used to it. The muck and gut training seems to get lighter every time. We just know what to do. So, we started after that. And really after that, it became pretty clear that we needed some long-term engagement. And so Houston Response was ramped up really to help develop and support coalitions across Greater Houston, because a church in Clear Lake working with a church in the Woodlands doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And most our events, hopefully, are localized, not as big as Harvey. And so it was really critical. My group of churches here in Clear Lake, that we work together. We develop easy on ramps for us to keep serving. We found that long-term churches don't engage past a certain point. But we knew it wasn't a desire. It wasn't because they didn't have a desire. It was because they didn't have easy on-ramps. I mean, that's not what they do. They're willing to support, and they have a massive volunteer army when they put their energy around something, but it's not really what they do long-term. And so we ramped up these coalitions. Two of them formed with that before Houston Responds had even started. And then we just said, that's a great idea. We're just going to make more. And so that's really how we got started. And now we have I think over 15 coalitions across Greater Houston. So that's what we were doing. We were continuing to keep churches engaged. The minute that we got a grant, or the minute that we got any kind of funding for personnel so that we could have more volunteers, we had churches immediately fill those spots. And so, that's what we were doing. I think collectively all the coalitions have done, it's over 1,000 homes. I don't know how many. And so there's been a massive work. So when COVID-19 hit, we're still kind of cranking away at that and getting those things done, launching coalitions, that kind of thing. And then this was very different. It was something that was definitely not on our radar as it related to, disaster response. So I think we really had to pivot. We'd been through, Imelda, so we knew what it was like to pivot when a disaster hit. Actually being active, we were a response. I mean, we were post Harvey. And so we had learned how to pivot, how to develop some coalitions real fast to get active. So this, a very similar pivot, but just to something completely new we didn't know how to do. And so it's really been good for us. It's also been good to help churches realize the value of an organization who exists, to help them engage in these unique times that they don't know how to do it. They're not connected to the resources and those kinds of things, and really help them make those relationships so they can engage a lot. It's been fascinating that this has been a slow growth. We're used to flood, massive amounts of volunteers that slowly roll off into what needs to be done. This is a situation where the need for volunteers has been gradually growing. And so, how do we take the local food pantry that might have a lot of older senior adults and might be shutting down? How do we get it to 2, 3, 4 times their capacity? In early conversations with the food bank, the issue for volunteers wasn't at the food bank, but it was at these food pantries that need to quadruple in size. How do we get new volunteers doing that and doing it safely? Well, if you get the churches behind it, those things happen real fast. And so that was a major pivot for us to kind of engage many of those. We knew many of the churches and the nonprofits in that world, but we'd stayed in the disaster world, so it was a unique aspect. The other thing where we pivoted was also with the, we're working in the process. Early on, the question was, how does a church do this? How do they go online if they're not online? How do they, make these steps? What does it really look like? And so we found out that due to our relationships, through these coalitions, they were asking us these questions. And so we just started trying to get them answers. And in that process, that really created us as kind of a conduit of communication. And so we have, we're kind of a convener at this point in time. So we're convening these work groups of churches that can afford to throw a little bit like extra energy into this as a resource to really kind of curate information and what all of them are doing so that we can share that information to the 4,000 churches across Greater Houston. And so that's another area where we've pivoted, is to provide that. And then finally, the third way is we're doing something very similar to what you're doing, which is a faith leader insights, to really get senior pastors to be able to say, hey, here's how we pivoted here, here's how we changed here. It started from, Greg Mott at First Baptist and Dr. Ed Young at Second, saying how they shifted to small churches and how they've shifted. And so it's transitioned from that then to volunteers. And now it's transitioning again into what is the possibility of reopening look like, and how do we do that in a safe way? So we've pivoted is about the best word we can describe.
And it seems like you just keep rolling with whatever is coming, right? Wherever the need is, whatever happens next year, you're ready and willing to adapt to that.
That's the role that we have to fill. And that's what we're learning through this process, is the need. When you think about preparedness, and then you have this massive army of volunteers that wants to serve and love their community. But every day, that's not what they do. And it's not even it's not their mission for most of these churches. Most of these churches is about making disciples of Christ. But they still want to love their neighbors. And they do that many times. They support these food banks. They do all this kind of stuff. But in these unique times, they just need easier on-ramps, extra guidance, extra input, so they can be more efficient and effective. And they can stay in it longer term. And so that's why we exist. And though we pray someday we'll see what we call blue sky days, which is when we're not doing disaster recovery or disaster relief, that we're like, hey, there's no disasters around us. Let's just do disaster preparedness, readiness. We pray for those days.
Yeah, and right now, even alongside what you're doing for the pandemic, you're still doing all of your Hurricane Harvey relief efforts. Is that correct?
Yes, many of the coalitions, obviously they stopped bringing volunteers in, and they stopped working in homes that people were living in, or any of the homes in which people were not living in, they still continue to have, many of them continue to have their contractors or their employees that were doing the labor themselves. And so that continued through this whole process, because they were always they were always allowed to do that. And so for us, that's going on, and we're slowly looking at for these local and again, Houston Responds, we just support and help develop these coalitions everywhere. And so they're all doing different things, but still they're doing what their community needs. And so, that's still going on. We were also in the middle of rolling out the Willing and Able Readiness program, so that churches across and congregations across Greater Houston really can just raise their hand and say, hey, we're willing and able. We've done it before. We'll do it again. Sign us up. And then if we can have a local representative for each one of those churches and congregations who are interconnected, we jokingly say a ministerial alliance around disaster, using really old school terms. But still, if we can have those churches connected through that, in disaster, communications and knowing the other people you're working around makes everything happen so faster. So we've got some training that's going to go along that's congregation specific, what you do need to set up. How can a group of 3-4 people that know what they're doing turn into 100 volunteers overnight? And we know that happens, but how can we ensure that it's done and done well with everybody else? So, we use the illustration of 5-year-olds playing soccer a lot of times is what churches engaging in disaster recovery looks like. And honestly, we would like to at least raise the level to maybe 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, but really, just to help them do that in a way that is not just impactful for the community, because they will love the community, but in ways that's long-term impactful for them, and that they can develop relationships with the families and have that magical moment when the family has a need and you're able to meet it and boom, things happen. Those are magical moments, so that they can have that happen, because it doesn't just affect those that you're loving. It also affects the people who are helping. And what we have seen, and part of the reason why we do this, I spent 25 years as a church growth and fundraising consultant, is because when this happens, it does transform not just those you're serving and loving, but it also transforms those who are serving and loving the people. And so it's a major part of that transformation that the churches are committed to.
And why churches specifically are you rallying together?
Yeah. Well, and for us, I mean, like I said, I've been a consultant with Christian churches for 25 years, and that's just my faith tradition. That's where I come from. And what we see is important is in certain seasons, Interfaith Ministries is great, and they do an awesome job with Meals on Wheels and Volunteer Houston, and it's just really a great organization. But there's also certain seasons where you kind of have to maintain a voice to that audience. And so in the same way, we need to be able to say, hey, the parable of the my mind's just not working today. But we need to be able to maintain a voice for them that can help communicate and help them communicate to their congregation so they can get in and do this, and they can develop those relationships. But in that process, we've also, it's our goal to work with all people, number one. And number two is to support all the faith traditions in this process. So we can make everything that we do completely open source. Anything that we do, anybody can steal. When I got into this, I got so frustrated with that wasn't the case. And I said, well, we're going to be completely different. And our board was on board. So everything we do, you can steal, you can take, you can run with it, and we're great with. But really, it's that idea that I cannot speak the same language to a synagogue that a rabbi can. Same with a mosque, same with those kinds of things. And so it's really about maintaining that voice into those congregations so that you have a deeper relationship. But that's completely different than saying we don't want to work with other organizations. It's just maintaining. Our goal is to rally people. Our goal is to get people involved. Our goal is to make it impactful for the people in the church. And so to do that, you have to have that voice. And that's why we focus on that. But in everything we do, we try to make it open source, and we invite people to learn with it. And we have partnerships all over the place with those who are doing that. In fact, with the Mass for All campaign, everybody's doing it, and we're great, and we're giving it all away. And if it happens, it's just because everybody did it.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? That's such a great campaign that you have going on.
You bet. And this is really, it's just an outgrowth of how we see churches engaging from the standpoint of, when disaster strikes, if they know what to do, they will do something. And so we began to kind of put the rallying cry out for food pantries. They were already on the radar to help these organizations go double, triple. I was at a food pantry today where KSBJ was there, and it was about to close in Clear Lake. And so 4 or 5 churches around Clear Lake found out about it, and boom, they're as big as they've ever been in a matter of 6 weeks from when that happened. So it's amazing when they want to do something, what can happen, and they want to do something. So you just really have to put out the rallying cry. And so for this, and with mask, one of the most neighborly things you can do is wear a mask, because it's a lot more about protecting everybody else than protecting yourself. So the most neighborly, loving thing you can do is A, wear a mask, and then B, give one away. And so we just really had to ramp up that messaging. And so that's really what the Mask for All campaign is, get needs awareness. There's already hundreds of churches doing this. And I'll be honest with you, it's incredibly difficult to find out who all's doing it, because a church does it. They have their own nonprofit partner. They're cranking away. They're doing great stuff. And that's exactly how it should be. So for us, it's a very decentralized way in which we can, if you want to provide the mass for us, great. We'll make sure they get distributed. But for many of the churches, they're already working with their local partner. And so really the rallying cry was, how can we get 1,000 churches doing this? And that's our goal. It's a big, audacious goal. It's realistic from the standpoint of probably what's going on. It's going to be almost incredibly difficult to ever fully document that. And our goal is 1 million masks, but it's fascinating. There's a small church in Pearland with 250 people, and they have a sewing circle of 5-6 ladies. They've done 2,000 masks in a month. It's insane. And they're loving it. And they're like, we're going to do 10,000, their goal. And so it's just that kind of stuff that when they get after it, those little miracles happen. And that's just an example of that. And so really it's just a rallying cry to say, hey, the need's out there. It's a great opportunity to love your neighbor, and to make sure that, just the number of single-use masks that are going out the door, it only, it only solves a problem once. And so the multi-use mask is going to be, the reusable mask is going to be critical as we look at the next few months. And we're going to need to be wearing this mask for a long time.
Yeah, and you keep mentioning the rallying cry. You said that you're from a Christian tradition. So what has it been like for you to be the point of contact for that rallying cry for so many faith traditions?
I have found that that's, we all know we have different faith traditions when I've talked to other leaders. And so it's just really been about respecting the process. And for us, really, I think because we try to be an open door, we try to communicate in such a way that we share everything. I think it's been great. I mean, those partnerships have always been there. A lot of times it's funny, if the synagogue across the street from your Baptist church, they already know each other. I mean, they do things together. That's just the nature of the beast as neighbors. Sometimes when we go up above that level, then we, do and don't like to necessarily talk to each other. And so really it's that same approach. We're all in this world of disaster. We're all in this world of trying to respond, and however we can help each other, let's do it. So it's been great. And I've got great response. And part of it's because when I say, hey, I can't speak into a mosque, and a mom can't, they're not going to be able to really go into a Christian church and kind of promote that rallying cry. And so that's why it's so important for us in Houston Responds to be able to keep that message, but also, it's also a funding aspect to it as well, because, Christian churches are going to more comfortably fill into an organization that helps them reach their mission and therefore has a Christian aspect to it. And again, Houston Responds, you look through our website, and even when we do videos, we try to do it in such a way that they can be used by corporations and everybody else. But still, it's to our DNA, and it allows us to do that. And the same thing is true with the other faiths. So it's kind of a sweet spot for us. But I mean, we know organizations have worked with and support organizations like Interfaith and all those other kind of things in other places, and say, hey, this is just what we've learned on how to mobilize the churches in this way.
Yeah, and just to kind of tie it all together, how do you think that something so fundamental, helping people during disaster relief, churches helping people in this way on such a basic level, how do you think that speaks to how we're trying to help the dignity of the human person in the Houston community, help them know that we're here for you no matter what?
Yeah, I'll answer that in two ways. First way, I'll answer it from the perspective of the church as an organization. Is, when Ike happened for many of the churches in the Bay Area, and we responded via mucking and gutting and did the normal process, what it did was, for many churches, it really kind of shifted their DNA. It helped many people realize, I can do some amazing things to help people, and I don't even think I'm doing amazing things. And so that really affects that person. And so part of it, what it is they have a much better external view of their world. In my consulting in the past, we would talk about how to kind of exercise the compassion DNA. Nobody cares what you know until they know that you care. So, and so it's just, but yeah, that's kind of like a muscle that you have to exercise, that, if you live in your own world that's insulated with the people who look just like you, act just like you, think just like you, and don't have problems, we all know that's not true, then, but when you get out there, you step outside the doors, you start to love people, that really begins to change. So a disaster puts that idea just in a microwave, it's 1 minute, and blows it up. And so that's what we see. So first of all, it changes for churches. Our hope and prayer is that it's also impactful for that person who might be doing this for the first time, might be able to be used by God their first time, and really understand that, hey, I have a role in this, and I can love my neighbor, and that's an impact, and do that. But also while they're doing it, so it transforms them, but also while they're doing it, and they develop these relationships. Many times they're talking to people that they probably would have never talked to. They're loving on people they never loved, and their heart opens up to this new person, and they start to see things different ways. So for our church after Ike, we were restructuring in such a way that, every small group has to have a missions project. It just became part of our DNA that we understood if we're going to really live into our mission of building fully devoted followers of Christ that love their community, we have to go love our community. And so that really changed how we did it, and saw how people change, because you can preach it, but until people see it in their heart and start to live it out. So really, that's how I think this is so impactful during disaster, is people start to see each other differently, and it's that idea that in a time of crisis, you don't see red, yellow, black, and white nearly as much as you might in other times. And I hope and pray that's absolutely true. And so I think that's really where it is. And our hope is that the relationships, especially like with this, one of the blessings I would say of COVID-19 is the fact that so many of churches and congregations across Greater Houston, they've developed much deeper partnerships with local food pantries and serving these families and doing all these things, so that sometimes it's helpful for them to realize on an ongoing basis how much these nonprofits really rely on them, and what they can really do to transform their community, even when it's blue sky days. So that's my hope.
Well, Tommy, thank you so much for this conversation. It was enlightening to hear that from your perspective, and just going on the Houston Responds website and the resource page. There's so much there for people who even have questions about using technology. I was so excited to see your links to how-tos on even how to, broadcast something in your church. So
yeah, and let me say, we have an amazing staff that has been working their tails off. And on top of that, we just have churches that we steal stuff from. And we a friend of mine calls it R&D, rob and duplicate. So we've done our R&D. And so that's our DNA is to do that. So it's really, we have an amazing staff that has been doing amazing work. And then beyond that, the coalition leaders who've been able to pivot from rebuild focus to what are we doing, to mass, to supporting these food pantries, but still rallying volunteers, across the board. It's just amazing people who, at the end of the day, want to see those who are in crisis or who are in need just get the help and love they need.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. And, we appreciate everything that you're doing. It's awesome.
You bet. Thank you.
All right. Bye.